His name is Gaba. He is 47 years old. He is a grain trader in Kano's Dawanau market, the largest grain market in West Africa. He buys in bulk, stores in a rented warehouse, and sells to smaller traders who distribute across the state. He has been doing this for 22 years. Every Friday, Gaba attends Juma prayer at his neighborhood mosque. The imam there is a man he has known since childhood, a scholar who went to the same primary school as Gaba's uncle, who has presided over the marriages of 3 of Gaba's cousins, who visited Gaba's father during the man's final illness. When the imam speaks, Gaba listens, not because he is told to, because the relationship has been built over a lifetime. 2 Fridays ago, Gaba said nothing about politics, but the Friday before that, he made a specific comment after prayer, just a few sentences, spoken quietly, not from the minbar, but standing in the mosque courtyard. He said that when a man chooses his government, he should choose wisely. He said the right leader protects the community. He said the community would discuss this more in the coming months. Gaba walked home from that mosque and thought about those sentences for 4 days. What is happening to Gaba is really about the most underreported power in Nigerian politics, the quiet authority of traditional rulers, emirs, obas, igwes, obongs, tors, and equivalents, and thousands of second- and third-class chiefs and community heads below them. These figures are not elected officials. They derive authority from lineage, appointment, and community recognition. The Nigerian constitution does not assign them formal governance roles, but their informal power over community sentiment, over voter motivation, over the acceptance or rejection of political messages is among the most powerful forces in Nigerian electoral politics. The evidence for their electoral influence is specific and documented. In 2003, the Emir of Kano at the time publicly aligned with the PDP's presidential candidate, and Kano delivered overwhelmingly for the PDP. In 2015, when the political winds shifted, northern traditional rulers were notably quiet about APC opposition, and the north swung to Buhari. In 2023, the Sultan of Sokoto's restraint, his explicit refusal to tell Muslims how to vote despite pressure from both sides, was interpreted as a signal of deliberate neutrality that allowed the northern Muslim vote to fragment across candidates. Now, in 2026, with 14 months to the 2027 election, both the APC and the NDC are actively engaging traditional institutions. The APC has been using state governors, many of whom have direct influence over traditional ruler appointments in their states, to maintain alignment. The NDC is using community-level outreach, mosque visits, and iftar gatherings, as we documented in our religious leaders video, to build relationships that bypass the political machinery and reach communities through the channels that traditional authority structures operate in. The trigger that makes this story specifically urgent right now is the traditional rulers' response to the Middle Belt security crisis. In Benue, in Plateau, in Nasarawa, communities under sustained attack have been turning to their traditional rulers as the first and most trusted point of crisis management. When traditional rulers speak about security failure, about government accountability, about community survival, those statements carry more weight in their communities than any press conference from any politician. Let me explain the constitutional and legal framework governing traditional rulers, because understanding their formal powerlessness helps explain why their informal power is so significant. The 1999 Constitution does not mention traditional rulers as a tier of government. They are not in the executive, legislative, or judicial branch. They receive no federal statutory allocation. Their formal existence is governed at the state level through state chieftaincy laws that determine who can be appointed, removed, or recognized as a traditional ruler in each state. This means critically that governors control traditional ruler appointments in their states. A governor who wants a friendly emir or oba appointed, or who wants a hostile one dethroned, has legal tools at his disposal. The history of Nigerian politics is full of examples of governors appointing political allies to political stools and dethroning opponents. Former Kano Governor Ganduje's dethronement of Emir Sanusi Lamido Sanusi in 2020, a move almost universally attributed to political rather than chieftaincy reasons, is the most visible recent example.
This creates the gray area at the heart of the traditional ruler story. Traditional rulers who depend on governors for their tenure are not fully independent of the political class. An emir who owes his stool to an APC governor is an emir who is unlikely to use his community influence against the APC's preferred candidates. An oba who was appointed under a PDP governor and survived into an APC era has a different calculation about how much political independence he can exercise. But, and this is critical, the most respected traditional rulers in Nigerian political history have been the ones who maintained enough independence to speak with moral authority. The Sultan of Sokoto's constitutional role as the President General of the Jamaatul Nasril Islam means his statements about electoral conduct carry weight precisely because they are not understood as partisan. When the Sultan says Nigerians should vote for competence, the value of that statement derives from its perceived non-partisanship. The moment any traditional ruler is seen as a paid political actor, the moral authority that gives them influence is weakened. Now, let me map specifically how both political camps are engaging traditional rulers before 2027, because this engagement is documented, active, and consequential. The APC strategy is primarily structural. Governors control traditional ruler appointments. 31 APC governors means 31 state machineries that have some degree of leverage over traditional ruler relationships in their states. This is not primarily about direct payments to traditional rulers. It is about the institutional dependence that the chieftaincy appointment system creates. An emir who knows that any expression of political independence could result in a chieftaincy inquiry, a government funding cut to his palace, or a hostile appointment process for his successor is an emir who calculates the cost of speaking freely. The NDC strategy is community-level relationship building. As we documented in our religious leaders video, Peter Obi's camp has been attending Ramadan iftars in northern states with financial contributions, specifically trying to build relationships with religious and community leaders who operate within the same community trust networks as traditional rulers. The NDC's ward-level registration drive through ndcregister.com is also designed to work through community networks, not through party machinery. Both of these approaches are attempts to reach the community influence structures that traditional rulers anchor. The most important traditional ruler in Nigeria's 2027 political picture is the Sultan of Sokoto, Saadu Abubakar. The Sultan is the highest Muslim religious authority in Nigeria, presiding over the Jamaatul Nasril Islam and commanding respect across Muslim communities that extends far beyond Sokoto state. His political signals, or deliberate absences of signal, are the most closely watched statements in Nigeria's religious political landscape. In 2023, the Sultan's restraint, his refusal to tell Muslims to vote for or against any candidate, was specifically noted by political analysts as enabling the northern Muslim vote to fragment across candidates. If the Sultan maintains the same restraint in 2027, the northern Muslim electorate is more available to Kwankwaso's NDC mobilization than if he signals alignment with the APC or the status quo. Now, if what I just laid out surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know your take before we get to the part that changes the whole picture. And here is the part that changes the whole picture. The most politically explosive traditional ruler story heading into 2027 is not about any named emir or oba. It is about what is happening in the Middle Belt, specifically in Benue and Plateau, where traditional rulers are becoming the primary spokespeople for communities that the government has failed to protect. Amnesty International reported that between 2023 and mid-2025, suspected armed groups killed more than 6,800 people in Benue State and at least 2,600 in Plateau State, more than 10,000 deaths in communities that these traditional rulers preside over. In Benue, Plateau, and Nasarawa, traditional rulers are not managing political campaigns. They are managing funerals. They are managing displacement. They are managing communities that have lost farms, markets, and neighbors to violence. When the Tortiv or a Berom chief or a Benue community head speaks about security failure, when they say their government has not protected their people, that statement travels through community networks with an authority that no NDC press conference can replicate. It lands in churches, in markets, in homes, in exactly the kind of community conversations that Gaba had after his imam spoke in the mosque courtyard. Gaba heard his imam speak in the mosque courtyard, quietly, not from the minbar, just a few sentences about choosing government wisely. He walked home and thought about those sentences for 4 days. For Garba, the traditional ruler and religious community authority structure is not an abstract political concept. It is the actual community infrastructure of his daily life. His imam married his cousins. His market guild chief helps resolve disputes when his goods are damaged. His ward's community head knows which families have young men who sometimes take money to be available at polling units. These relationships are the texture of his community, and they shape his political world at a level no campaign poster ever reaches. So, what does this mean for ordinary Nigerians like Garba? It means that the 2027 election will not be decided solely by campaign rallies, party primaries, and media strategy. It will be decided in thousands of conversations like the one his imam started, conversations that happen in mosques, in churches,
in community meetings, in palace anterooms, in market guild meetings, that aggregate over months into political sentiment that is nearly invisible to national media but deeply felt in communities. Both the APC and the NDC understand this. The APC is using structural power, governor appointment authority, state patronage, palace funding to maintain alignment. The NDC is using relationship building, mosque visits, and community outreach to try to earn trust. The question is, which approach is more effective in 2027 when the economic pain is this acute and the security failure in the Middle Belt is this documented? The international dimension here is genuine and specific. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom and the U.S. State Department's annual report on international religious freedom both track Nigeria's traditional and religious authority structures as components of the country's religious landscape. When traditional rulers and imams speak on electoral issues, including statements that could constitute religious endorsement or religious exclusion of candidates, those statements are documented by international religious freedom monitors. The specific concern heading into 2027 is the intersection of traditional authority and electoral intimidation. In states where APC governors control the traditional ruler appointment process and the security deployment, there is a documented risk that community leaders who express political independence face informal pressure, funding cuts, chieftaincy inquiries, or security neglect. International observers who monitor the pre-election environment track exactly this kind of institutional pressure. For the diaspora, the traditional ruler dimension resonates specifically because diaspora communities maintain strong connections to their home communities through exactly the same networks, hometown associations, community WhatsApp groups, festival contributions that traditional ruler authority structures operate within. When a Lagos-based Kano trader's uncle tells him what the local emir said at a community meeting, that message travels through a diaspora-connected network that reaches the UK, Canada, and the US. The diaspora's political sentiment is shaped partly by these community authority signals. Let me give the strongest argument against the traditional ruler influence narrative before explaining where it falls short. The argument is this: traditional rulers in Nigeria's democratic era have consistently overstated their electoral influence. In 2023, the Emir of Kano's public commentary on governance did not produce a Kano political outcome that reflected his preferences. The Tortives Community Authority in Benue did not prevent the APC from winning the governorship. Northern traditional rulers who urged their communities towards specific voting choices in 2019 found that economic conditions and political calculations at the ward level were more decisive than palace pronouncements. Nigerian voters, particularly in urban areas, make their own calculations. The idea that an imam's courtyard statement determines how Garba votes is condescending to Nigerian democratic agency. That argument has substance. Nigerian democratic behavior has been more sophisticated than traditional ruler endorsement models predict. The obedient movement in 2023 explicitly rejected godfather and traditional authority mobilization and produced results that surprised every analyst who used those models. Where it falls short is in the Middle Belt specifically and in rural communities generally. In communities where the state has failed so comprehensively, where the government has not protected lives, has not compensated displaced farmers, has not built roads or schools, the moral authority of traditional rulers who have been physically present through the crisis is enormous. In those communities, the traditional ruler is not competing with the state for authority, he has it by default because the state is absent. The traditional ruler influence narrative is overstated for urban middle-class voters. It is understated for rural community voters in insecurity-affected areas.
2027 will be decided partly in those rural communities, and in those communities, the Imam's courtyard statement is not one input among many, it is the most trusted signal available. Here's what to watch for the traditional ruler dimension between now and January 2027. Watch the Sultan of Sokoto signals specifically. The Sultan is scheduled to preside over the Eid prayers and multiple significant Islamic calendar events between now and January 2027. Watch whether his khutbahs or public statements contain any language about electoral conduct, candidate qualities, or governance accountability. A sultan who speaks clearly about the criteria for good governance without naming candidates is exercising exactly the kind of moral authority that shapes the northern Muslim electorate's permissibility towards different candidates. A sultan who remains completely silent signals deliberate non-interference. Both are politically significant. Watch whether the APC or NDC makes any documented payment to a traditional ruler institution, a palace renovation grant, a government subvention, a state event hosted at a royal court in the 6 months before the election. These transactions are documented and reported locally, even when they are not covered nationally. They represent the cash component of the governor traditional ruler alignment strategy. Watch traditional ruler statements from Benue and Plateau specifically. The Middle Belt security crisis is producing a community leadership voice that is independent of party structures because what those communities are experiencing transcends party. When the Tortiv or a senior Beram chief speaks about security failure, watch whether any political party explicitly incorporates those statements into its campaign narrative. The NDC's strongest Middle Belt argument is not a policy paper. It is the moral authority of a Beram chief standing in a community that the federal government has failed to protect. Watch whether the ALGON or any national traditional ruler body issues a statement on the 2027 electoral environment. A collective statement from traditional rulers about electoral conduct, voter protection, or security conditions would be the most significant traditional authority intervention in Nigerian electoral history since the pre-election period of 2011. Worst-case scenario. Traditional rulers in APC-governed states are kept fully aligned through governor patronage. Middle Belt's traditional ruler voices are not amplified into a national narrative, the Sultan maintains complete silence, and the 2027 election is contested without any significant traditional authority input that counters the APC's structural advantage. In that scenario, the quiet influence remains quiet and delivers no electoral change. Best-case scenario, the Sultan speaks with moral clarity about governance criteria before the election. Middle Belt's traditional ruler voices about security failure are amplified by the NDC and international media, and community-level traditional authority structures in Kano, the Middle Belt, and the South mobilize their communities towards higher turnout based on genuine governance accountability arguments. In that scenario, the quiet influence becomes the loudest voice in the room on election day. At the beginning of this video, Garba walked home from his neighborhood mosque having heard his imam say a few quiet sentences about choosing government wisely. He thought about those sentences for 4 days. Here is what I can tell Garba and what this means for everyone watching. The imam's courtyard statement was not an instruction, it was an invitation to think seriously about what choosing government actually means, not as a party loyalty exercise, not as an ethnic calculation, but as a community survival decision. For Garba, that invitation is meaningful because of who issued it, not a senator, not a party chairman, not a social media influencer, the man who married his cousins, the man who visited his dying father, the man who has been physically present in his community through every crisis for 20 years. That is the quiet influence of traditional and religious authority that every political analysis underestimates. It is not loud, it does not issue press releases, it does not appear on campaign billboards, but it is present in every community in Nigeria, in every market, every mosque, every church, every palace, and it is being engaged, managed, courted, and sometimes captured by every political actor who understands what it is worth. Whether that quiet influence speaks clearly in 2027 and what it says may be the most important untracked variable in the entire election. The Sultan knows this, every emir and oba and igwe and tor knows this, and Garba, walking home from the mosque with 4 days of quiet thought behind him, knows this too. What do you think? Do traditional rulers still have real political influence in Nigeria, or has democratic culture moved past them? Drop your honest analysis in the comments. Before you go, I just want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with NaijaNewsWatch today. Your support means more than you probably realize. Every view, every thoughtful comment, every like, every share, and every subscription helps this channel continue to grow and gives me the motivation to keep researching and creating balanced, in-depth documentaries about Nigerian politics. If today's video gave you a clearer understanding of what's happening beyond the headlines, please share it with someone who would appreciate it too. Thank you for being part of this community. I'll see you in the next documentary. Until then, stay informed, keep asking questions, and as always, stay sharp.